Hashem's Vasai Titzach Uviyagitila Sacha. We're now in the 5th parak of Daniel. In this parak, another famous story. We are no longer with Nebuchadnezzar. Now we're with Belshazzar. Now, King Belshazzar, there's a machlokas. Some say that he was actually the son of Nebuchadnezzar. But historians find that there was Eben Merodach, which was really his father. And so Belshazzar, when he keeps on referring to Nebuchadnezzar as his father, what he's meaning is my important ancestor. Others say that really Nebuchadnezzar had a daughter, and Belshazzar was the son of his daughter. Why is that significant? Well, we go back to what it is that Jewish people are very much believe philosophically in our Masorah. Min hakabosinu biyadenu. We pass down from generation to generation. Chayav adam l'ros et atzmo ki'ilu yatzim mitzrayim. We want to relive and we want to really take in the lessons. And we also say that any generation that does not bring the Beis HaMikdash, it's because we haven't yet been talking. We haven't learned from our mistakes. Well, Belshazzar, perhaps this interesting story about him really hones in on that same point. Did you not learn from literally either your father or your grandfather? What were you thinking? So now let's get into the parak itself and what is the important message that we can glean from it. So Belshazzar, Malka Aved Lachem, Rav, so he gave a beautiful banquet, and what did he have? That Chamar Shtei, and in that he was drinking a lot of wine. Why was he drinking so much wine? Well, in fact, first of all, it was to suggest to his people they had just fought a war and they were able to defend against the capital, to defend the capital city against the enemies, which was Persia and Mede. And the idea was that, you know what, we were successful. And I want to suggest to the people that we're going to continue to be successful. And so he drank. But how did he drink? Not with regular goblets, but rather Zahava B'Kispa. He ordered gold and silver vessels. Which vessels? Nebuchadnezzar Abuhe Min HaHechala Di B'Yerushalayim. He took out the beautiful and holy Kedusha vessels of the Beis HaMikdash. And he thought, you know what? Just like I know that I am the King of all kings, I can take and have a revelry with the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash. And that's exactly, not only did he drink, but he allowed his nobles to drink, all his concubines to drink from the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash. Whoa. So that's exactly what happened. The beautiful golden vessels that were taken out of the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim were brought to the king, and they all consumed and they drank and they got drunk from it. And while they were drinking, they were praising the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron, wood and stone. Where have we heard that one before? Perhaps this is Daniel's suggestion. You know where you heard it before? This was that story. The story of the golden head. The story that Nebuchadnezzar was given privy to the understanding that your dynasty will end. And when it does, the gold and the silver, the bronze, the iron, the wood, and the stone are all going to not be knocked down, and it will only be that stone, the stone of the Bnei Yisrael, and the wind that is brought by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that allows that there will be there will be a reckoning. Now, when that is happening, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends a huge miracle, the famous miracle, Ba Shasa Atzba'an Diyad Enosh. A human hand comes down and the fingers appear. And what they do is they write on the wall of the palace and they write a message. Now there's a machlokas as to this writing. What is it? Why no one could read the writing. Literally, they're writing on the wall. And the idea is that either Hashem or Gabriel wrote, and either he wrote in gematria of Atbash. So for every aleph, it's Taf, and for every Beis, it's a Shin, and etc., etc. So it was very confusing, and no one could figure it out. Or it was written backwards, or it was written in a graph, top to bottom. Interestingly enough, Rembrandt, in his Belshazzar painting, depicts, according to, he lived in Amsterdam, and he was able to hear the arguments of as to, how couldn't they read what was on the wall, and he depicts it. Interestingly enough, in any event, what happens is the Belshazzar sees what's happening, and his face gets dark. He starts to panic. He panics, his knees are locked together. His belt buckle flies out, and he calls for all of his divine people to be able to figure out whoever can read this writing is going to be clothed in purple, wear a golden chain on his neck, and rule a third of my kingdom. Is it really a third? Is it that he's going to be in a tripartite, so it's going to be a power? But he is willing to give a lot of money and kavod to to the person who's able to uncover this dream. And when all the king's wise men came, minus Daniel, they obviously couldn't read it because, of course, they're limited, and they couldn't make it known to the king. And so he got even more scared, Belshazzar, and his face darkened, and his nobles, everyone's looking at him like, why is the king having a panic attack? And essentially, he says, he's panicked out, and the queen, who is this queen? Perhaps it is the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar, or it's the highest level of his in his kingdom, and she says to him, "King, live forever. Don't be so upset. We can solve this easy enough. You know what? You're going to, there was a man, I don't know if you remember, but during your father's time, who was much smarter than all these other guys, and he was really appointed the chief. So, why don't you just go ask him? He's the chief over all of the magicians and the exorcists, so it would be a really good idea to ask him what to do." And seeing that was good, again, the idea of a woman having a good idea, helping along, nudging things along. We certainly just finished Esther, and we clearly have an indication from all of our prior times that the woman can really impact on the change. And so she's the voice of reason. She doesn't fall apart, and she calls for Daniel. Now Daniel comes in, and he comes in before the king, and the king, of course, refers to him as Yehud, because a Jew is always going to be referred to as a Jew. Clearly, the one who's one of the exiled from Yehuda, and he gives a lot of praise to him, and he says, "Please, everyone else was unable to read and to interpret this dream. Tell me what it means." And what does Daniel do? And he says, and he offers him clothing and chains and the third of the kingdom, just like he offered everybody else. And Daniel says, in accordance with what he learned from his Avram Avinu, when Avram Avinu said, "I'm not going to even touch a drop of any of the things that you give me because I don't want anyone to think that that's how I got rich." So similarly, Daniel, in his very strong way, says, "You can keep your gifts. I don't want your presents, but I am going to tell you because you can't buy me." Unlike anti-Semitic ways, that we're all about the money. We're not all about the money. This Jew is not all about the money. I don't want the money. And ultimately, he starts to go. And he says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave kingship, grandeur, and glory, and majesty to your father, Nebuchadnezzar. Again, either your ancestor Nebuchadnezzar, as in your grandfather, or actually your father. And for that reason, all of the people in the nations of every language trembled him. Everyone, if he wanted you to be put to death, you were put to death. If he wanted you to live, you were lived. If he wanted you to be in a high position, you were high position or a low position. And perhaps there's just an element here of when it's talking about the king, it's almost reminiscent of him kind of giving a backhanded, nudge towards praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But ultimately, when he grew haughty and willful, and he no longer felt that, that there was a power above him, and he couldn't remember the dream that was given to him, what happened? He was deposed from his royal throne, and he had no more glory. And he was driven, and he became an animal. And he was terrible. He fed like the cattle, his body drenched in the dew of heaven. He literally lived outside for 7 seasons. And ultimately, after that, he came to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Melech Malchei HaMelechim. And you, Belshazzar, why don't you know this? Why did you not learn from the mistakes of your father? Why didn't you not learn and understand that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Melech Malchei HaMelechim, or to the very least be respectful of him? Because Nebuchadnezzar didn't convert, but he had respect in the end for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that idea should have carried over into you. And what did you do? You drank from the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash. You, your nobles, and all your everyone, and you praised the gods using all of the beautiful kalim. What were you thinking? Don't you understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything, he controls everything, every move you make? How could you do this? And for that reason, a hand appeared, and a hand wrote. And what is it that he wrote? Mana mana tzaka lefarsin. And what does that mean? That means mana, Hashem has numbered your kingdom. You were going to only be for 70 years. That was one idea. That was one set of numbers. But then HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Nebuchadnezzar that you, through your grandchildren, will be in charge of Bavel. And it could have gone longer. But so number one is your days are numbered. And number two is I assess the situation and you're not worthy of extending any time that could have been extended. And so you were weighed in the balance and you were found to be guilty. You were found to be chasir, devoid of a reason to save you. And so for that reason, pares parisas malchosayach bibas lamdai uparas. And if you hear the word paras, it's written many a times. What is paras? Paras is to be divided. But we know better. We know that if you think about that amazing statue, the top was gold, that was Bavel. But what was the next? What was the part that would encompass the arms? That was parasumadai. The silver is what's going to come next. And this is exactly what was suggested. And so here, Paras Umadai, the Persians are going to conquer you. And it is because you were so terrible. And on that night, on that exact night, which is the night of Pesach, the Seder night, the night that we suggest that we know for our Mesorah, that we are B'nai Chorin, and that we have to remember that we were taken out of Mitzrayim, and to elevate ourselves for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is a night that is all about the Geula. That same night, Belshazzar clothed Daniel in purple, placed a gold chain on his neck, said that he should rule, and then he was killed. He was killed by Koresh and Daryavesh, Darius and Cyrus, and ultimately his Malchus, the Malchus of Bavel, ends. What is our takeaway? Interesting. What is our writing on the wall? Well, first of all, learn from the prior mistakes. Anything that's written in the Megillah is written Ladoros. Anything that we experience in life is to help us, to propel us to be our best self. So when the writing is on the wall, try to read it. Try to understand that part of our idea of bitachon is that everything that we're given is for the purpose of elevating ourselves. Belshazzar was given a lot, but he also had the Masorah. He listened to none of it. He didn't even take on the advisor, Daniel, who was the greatest of all advisors, who knew everything. He needed the queen to remind him. He didn't take on the idea, didn't you learn from your father or your grandfather going nuts for 7 years and then saying, I see the light? Like, where were you? What were you doing? But also importantly, the value that we place on our Makomos of Kedusha, our Kalim of Kedusha, and ultimately the Kedusha of the Keser Torah, of Torah. We have to give respect and elevate the places like the shuls, the batei knesios and midrashos, the elements that we have in our life that are kadosh. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash, but we have plenty of kalim. We have plenty of vessels. How we use our gold and silver, what we give credence to, is so important. Because if Belshazzar is being guilty because he desecrated the kalim, the vessels, then how much more so we have to be so careful with the vessels. The vessels are like the Talmidei Chachamim and the people that we respect, that are Mar B'Torah. We also have to be respectful of the Torah itself. And the idea here is that he couldn't process, and he literally lost it all. There is a very strong policy. You do not mess with anything of Kedusha. And nowadays, we don't have, unfortunately, if you've gone to the Vatican, they have it, but we don't have the obvious things of the Beis HaMikdash. But our Mikdash is our homes. Our Mikdash is our Shabbos table. Our Mikdash is what happens in the confines and the walls within our life. Let's embrace the idea that we have to be very careful. Very, very careful. And that is the message that is Ladoros. Because you can take away the Belshazzar, the takeaway from the Belshazzar story is a lot more deep than just a Babylonian king and how he couldn't see the writing on the wall. We don't need interpreters. We need our own eyes. We are Yehudim. We need our own eyes to be able to interpret our writing on the wall and to be our best self.